Let's see, I play guitar, bass, piano, pipe organ, flute, saxophone, which I haven't touched in many, many years, recorder, kazoo. Yeah, so my interest in music, I can't really trace my interest in music having a spark or a moment at any point in my life. It's more like it was always there, you know? Ever since I was in second grade, I played saxophone in the school band, and I learned along with my friends, and it was kind of a thing that I did with my friends. And then, you know, little by little, it came more and more a part of my life. And it really wasn't until very late high school that I even thought about, you know, what I would do for a living or a career or anything like that. And the only thing that I really did well and felt great about was doing music, whether that's playing my saxophone or my guitar or writing songs, which I started when I was 15 years old and still do today. So it's just something that gives me a great deal of fulfillment and gratification. It was always there, but there was never a moment where it was like, wow, okay, I'm gonna be a musician. It just sort of developed like over time. I went to high school from 1978 to 1982. And I know I'm betraying my age by saying that, but that was really a golden era in music, in popular music. There were so many really classic albums that were coming out at that time. The British prog rock movement with bands like Pink Floyd and, you know, The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon, which came out earlier in 1973, but still, this was a tremendous flowering of music. And it's curious to me because people your age are still listening to that music, and they still find it fresh and compelling, which is great. And, you know, I think it's important to analyze that music because it's so important, you know, in the whole history of popular music up till now. And I feel fortunate that I was around when, you know, The Wall came out, you know, and you know, so many other great records, and the flowering of popular music. So in 8th grade, my music teacher, Mrs. Numbers, had us all in like a music history type class, and she did 6 weeks on the Beatles, which for an 8th grader, 6 weeks is a long time to be studying one thing. But she really broke it down in terms of the periods of their development. There was an early, middle, and late period. And she would play examples of the music and tell us, you know, anecdotes about, you know, their lives. And, you know, so many of us just became totally hooked on not only their music, but their persona, and, you know, how their musical lives were integrated into cultural things. You know, the 60s were really a huge period of liberation for people, and the Beatles were so much a part of that. So there was this aura and mystique that everybody was just enthralled with. About I would say 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I was in Thomas Room 517, and one of my students, George Schlink, was messing around with his guitar, and he was playing a lick on the guitar from Octopus's Garden, you know, and I was like, George, that sounds great, and he was playing it really well. I was thinking, wow, that sounds quite impressive. And just right there and then I said, George, wouldn't it be cool if we had a class where we would study Abbey Road and then actually perform the album in its entirety? And he just looked at me and he said, yeah, I would be totally signed up for that. And then I started to think about it more and more seriously. And then, you know, just talking to different students, and people were like, yeah, oh, I love the Beatles, and, you know, that would be a great idea for a class. And that's how it happened. It happened because I was inspired by a student.
Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Lucy in the sky with diamonds.
Yeah, Sgt. Pepper's was much more difficult to put together, and the reason being is that it was conceived and recorded to be a studio album. It was never meant to be played live, and only because the technology we have with keyboards and computers and synthesizers can we, actually present the album in a live context, true to, the way that it sounded. But there are so many different things they did in the studio that even we weren't able to recreate perfectly in the class, but we had a pretty good approximation, with the computers. Abbey Road was much more of a sort of organic album. I mean, it was really the core of the Beatles, laying down basic tracks and recording and then dubbing in extra instruments and things like that. But the studio manipulations were not really apparent and used in Abbey Road. It's more like a band playing with, overdubs. Overdubs are easily covered by adding extra instrumentalists and things like that. So yeah, Sgt. Pepper's is much more difficult to put together. I do work 7 days a week. I don't have any days off because of these two big jobs that I have, but I feel like I don't even work. It's just so much fun.